the reality is that jihad is as old as Islam, and Islam spread by jihad.
But isn't the original
Muhammad,
version of jihad a war on your own vices?
No. That's just no. I mean, there is that component to it. There is a inner jihad and an outer jihad, but there was always an outer jihad, and that's how Muhammad spread the faith. And Muhammad, I mean, to answer your question very simply, as I did somewhere, I just said, there's absolutely nothing ISIS is doing, the Islamic State is doing, that Muhammad didn't do, right? I think I said, good luck finding something significant, that some difference between them. I mean, taking sex slaves, right? Muhammad took sex slaves and gave sex slaves to his generals. It was totally kosher. It's a kosher thing to do. If you're going to follow the example of Muhammad,
definitely not kosher.
Yeah, no, but halal. I mean, if you're going to follow Muhammad's example, which is is perhaps the main lens through which you have to look at this. I mean, there's just what's in the Quran, and there's what's in the Hadith, the larger literature, and there's the example of Muhammad, which is attested to in both those literatures and in the early biographies about him. Muhammad was not like the Buddha. He was not like Jesus. He was a conquering warlord who succeeded, right? And that is an example that is very different from the example of a guy who got crucified, or the example of a guy who spent his life meditating and then teaching, right? If the Buddha had been lopping heads off, at every sermon, and advocating, just talking endlessly about when to kill people and how many people to kill, and how to treat your sex slaves, if that was just strewn throughout the Buddha's teaching, I would expect Buddhists to behave exactly the way we see members of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram behave.
How to treat your sex slaves?
Sure. How many? So yes, you.
How do you treat your sex slaves?
Well,
not you.
Yeah.
But how was one?
Taking sex. I mean, taking sex slaves. So you can. It's not adultery if you're having sex with sex slaves. It's adultery if you're having sex with
someone you care about,
other women, right?
Whoa.
Other Muslim women. But
how convenient.
No, you can. Slavery. I mean, this is the horror of Abrahamic religion generally. I mean, this is why we know these books were not authored by a moral genius. The Bible and the Quran can't give you a basis to resist slavery. I mean, the slavery is supported in both traditions. So the fact that we have, after centuries, decided to more or less unanimously that slavery is an abomination, that proves that there's more moral wisdom to be found outside of these books than inside, at least on that point. And I would argue on virtually every other point of consequence. Now, it's not to say they're not gems of moral wisdom in some of these books, but they're not best found in those books. And there's so much else in there that gives you the ethic of the Taliban, and it's an inconvenient fact because it is. I mean, this is what the fundamentalists, the quote fundamentalists, do. The Islamists and the jihadists look at the books. The members of ISIS right now have the theology on their side. It's not like they're ignoring the books. They're looking at the books very literally. And they're saying, what in here, what are we doing that you don't find in the books, essentially? It's like this is just connect the dots.
Well, that was one of the videos that you had posted up on your blog that you and I discussed with
right.
The guy that was standing in front of all those people that was talking about stoning people for adultery or the treatment of homosexuals, and how that this is not radical Islam. This is just Islam.
Same accusations. This speaker supports death penalty for homosexuals. This speaker supports death penalty for this crime or that. He is homophobic. They subjugate women, etc., etc., etc. It's the same old stuff coming all the time. And I always try to tell them that, look, it's not that speaker that we're inviting who has these extreme radical views, as you say. These are general views that every Muslim actually has. Every Muslim believes in these things. Just because they're not telling you about it, or just because they're not out there in the media doesn't.
And that was shocking. And that's one of those videos where you post it or you talk about it and you get 1 million people that get upset at you over it. You get 1 million people that call you Islamophobic or what have you and get upset about it. And a lot of those are the same people. There was a weird thing that happened after Charlie Hebdo that really kind of freaked me out, where there was a lot of liberals and progressives that were pointing to the callousness of the cartoons as almost a justification for murdering a bunch of cartoonists. That, you know, the punching down thing kept being discussed, this weird liberal obsession with the way humor is disseminated, that in somehow or another it justified or at least rationalized the fact that they could just gun down cartoonists. Fucking cartoonists. You're not talking about people that are doing experiments on monkeys or people that are torturing animals. I mean, you're not talking about people that are imprisoning other human beings. You're not talking about people that are, you know, even stopping people from doing anything, just mocking them in cartoon form.
And in this case, mocking also Christianity and the Vatican, and many of the things that were interpreted as racist weren't even racist if you understood French or French politics. So it's political correctness and fears about being perceived as a racist, and this notion that that it makes sense to have a double standard here, where you can, that there's some trade-off between freedom of expression and freedom of religion, where when the freedom that's being claimed on the religious side is the freedom not to be offended, right? To not, so I mean, what's happening here is some number of Muslims are demanding that non-Muslims follow the taboos of Islam. So it's taboo for you to say anything negative about the Prophet, or even to depict him in a drawing, right?
That's where it gets really crazy,
and we want you to follow this taboo, though you are not Muslim. And we feel so strongly about this that we're going to kill you, or make credible threats of killing you, or we're just going to, when people do kill you, we're going to blame you for having gotten yourself killed, for having been so stupid and insensitive by caricaturing the Prophet. And that whole, I mean, that just has to lose. I mean, we have to hold to free speech so unequivocally that all the people over here who think that there's this trade-off between religious sensitivity and free speech just have to realize that they've lost, because we don't play this game with any other religion. Just think about this analogy I've used before, but the Book of Mormon, right? It just pillories Mormonism. It makes Mormonism look ridiculous, right? What did the Mormons do in response? The Mormons took out ads in Playbill, right? I mean, it was very cute what they did. They took out ads like, if you like the play, you know, come learn the real stuff, right? It was totally civil, good-natured, fine. But Trey Parker and Matt Stone are not looking over their shoulders for the Mormon assassins.
But
who
they
are coming for
were
them.
about Muslims.
Yeah, but briefly, they didn't even, they put Muhammad in a bear suit. It was just a bear, right?
And then they had to put the bear suit in a van.
Yeah, and then they pulled it off the air. They had to pull it off the air. And it made sense for them to pull it off the air given the actual nature of the threat. And so as I've argued, we have already lost our freedom of speech on this issue. And so
on that one individual issue, we've almost...
The only issue on earth, really. And there are people on the liberal side of this argument who think that is a good thing, that you are a racist to question the decency of that situation. And it's just not true. It's a completely insane doctrine that we should not have to. We should be able to criticize to our heart's content without threats of violence, as we can with every other insane doctrine.
Do you think that that's fear? That's a fear of Islam, a fear of retaliation, that they want to be on the side of the others because it's so dangerous, because they are the only religion that will come out and kill you? And these same people, I've found, that will call people out on being Islamophobic will not say a fucking peep about anti-Christian rhetoric. If you start talking shit about Jesus or mocking Christianity, they never have a word to say about it, because it's not dangerous. Because it's not dangerous to be on that side.
I think it's much more just white guilt and and political correctness.